Okay, I wanted to follow up on the issues related to Orange that we discussed on January the 9th and to express our concern and disappointment at the lack of urgency and apparent continued apathy on the part of the government in demonstrating that it is not really interested in getting to the bottom of this issue. While we welcome the replacement of Mr. Mazza and the announcement that the Board of Directors would be replaced, all indications are that the cover-up continues. While the President has been replaced, the rest of the senior management is still in place, and we have to ask why. These are individuals who were directly involved in the planning and in the implementation of the complex schemes that are at the very core of this scandal. Their continued presence calls into question the government's intentions. Given the minister's own admission that she now questions the integrity of the information she received from Orange about the use of public funds for their private endeavors, and those were her words, one would have expected at the very least that those responsible for that questionable information being delivered to the minister would have been immediately removed from the premises pending the outcome of investigations. The message to employees and to stakeholders and to the public is very clear. Nothing has changed. We now also have a better understanding of why the cover-up continues. We now know that Health Minister Matthews and senior McGuinty Liberal staffers were completely aware of what Orange executives and its board were up to. A released letter to Minister Matthews from Orange Board Chair Rainer Beltzner, dated January 19, 2011, lays out their plans to leverage taxpayers' money for the purpose of funding their self-serving business ventures. That letter blatantly states that these business ventures would be possible because of the tax dollars that Ontario's citizens invested through their government in building a world-class aero-medical transport system. In other words, those private ventures were only possible and would be leveraged as a result of Ontario's air ambulance services that had in fact been funded by Ontario tax dollars. What is equally as blatant and misleading is the claim that the multi-million-dollar bond offering that Orange was planning to float would require, and I quote from Mr. Beltzner's letter, nothing from the government and does not in any way prejudice Orange's ability to operate the Ontario system. The fact of the matter is that this is blatantly untrue, and for the chair of that board to communicate that information in writing to the minister is highly, highly questionable. The entire offering, that entire bond offering, is based on the underlying funding agreement that Orange has with the Ontario government. And investors would rely on that underlying guarantee of cash flow from the Ontario government and would make their investment decisions based on that information. Furthermore, the annual interest payments to bondholders would come out of the government's $150 million designated to pay for the delivery of air ambulance services. That amounts to some more than $5 million a year that investors would expect and would in fact receive, and ultimately would have to come out of dollars intended to deliver air ambulance services. Now, what's interesting is that the letter goes on to remind the minister that while under the terms of the so-called performance agreement, her ministry can monitor compliance, but it does not, and I repeat, it does not have the right, and I quote, to take over or direct the management or control of Orange, or appoint or replace the members of its board of directors or its management team. And so Mr. Beltzner, in his letter, is reminding the minister that she has no control over this organization. This is disturbing on two levels. First, that this agreement was entered into by the government in the first place. How can the Government of Ontario enter into an agreement to provide air ambulance services with an organization over which ultimately it would have no control, and yet is required to fund to the tune of $150 million a year? Second, that upon being reminded in this letter from Mr. Beltzner about these irresponsible terms of the agreement, the minister didn't immediately take the necessary steps to put an end to it right there. The letter further states that an in-person briefing was scheduled for January 24, 2011, for representatives from the Premier's office and the Ministry of Health to discuss Orange's business scheme in detail. We know that that briefing happened. With what we now know, the McGuinty Liberals have no choice but to accept our call for a select committee of the legislature to investigate this file. While Orange executives are being investigated for abusing tax dollars, the same organization we also know is under investigation by the coroner's office. Our question is this: how many deaths will it take for the coroner to officially call a province-wide inquiry into all calls involving deaths and an official review of all Orange policies and practices, so that all employees, past and present, can come forward and give evidence under oath? Only this way will we work towards putting the accountability, back into Orange. Willing to take questions.
The documents you're citing are making the case for the government to let those private entities be set up. And basically what the letter says and the document says, it's not going to cost you anything and you're going to make money. If that sounds too good to be true, how should the ministry have reacted?
Well, and it's very clear that it wasn't true. The letter states that in one part of the letter, but the letter, as I've quoted, also states very clearly that the only basis on which those private entities can venture out, whether it's for the bond offering or whether it's for credibility in the marketplace, is directly related to the fact that it was Ontario's public air ambulance services that provided not only the experience, but the goodwill as well to launch those new ventures. The minister should have caught that. It's disappointing. I have to believe that the only reason this wasn't stopped in its tracks is because the minister never read that letter.
The minister has said that she has ordered them to fire the president, that she intends to replace the board in the near future. So how is it that she doesn't have the power to do that?
Well, the letter from the board of directors to her told her that the performance agreement doesn't give her the authority to do that. It's in the letter. I ask you to read it. The minister should have read it. Now, has she found a way to do that? I'm hopeful that she has, but I'm simply pointing out here that this agreement from the very beginning, when the first health minister, Mr. Smitherman, crafted that agreement, it was a flawed agreement. It was irresponsible on the part of the government, and we now understand why we have a group of executives who have gone ahead, have developed this scheme with a great deal of arrogance, no regard to the public purse, and feel that they're untouchable. And that's why they're still there. And I'd suggest to you that there were senior staffers in the minister's office, in the premier's office, who were in on this briefing, who should, if they understood it, should have raised the alarm at that point and put an end to it. But the fact that it's ongoing and the fact that these executives are still in this office, we don't know what they're sanitizing by way of information that is in these files. Any corporate level of interest here would have ensured that these people are removed from their office the minute that an indication of this kind of mismanagement, abuse of information and tax dollars, that entire executive team should have been marched out of that office, a replacement team put in charge, and the interviews begin with the employees who are there to say, tell us what you know. That's not happening. There's a cover-up that's continuing, and we've said to the Premier, and I'm going to appeal to the Premier again, because I have to believe that the Premier is not aware of the details here. Someone has not briefed him, and I believe that the Premier wants the answers as well. And so once again, as I did on January the 9th, I'm going to call on the Premier to direct that action be taken. And I'm going to call on the Premier to strike that select committee so that an all-party investigation can take place. And as I've said to the coroner, I believe it's time for a province-wide inquiry, a province-wide inquest into every death that was in any way associated with transportation through Orange.
One of the problems we have right now is that we don't know how many deaths are being investigated right now. When the ministry moved in, they said that there would be more transparency. Has it been the case?
Yes, and that's why I say, instead of having more transparency, we have more cover-up. We have more people involved. I don't know how many teams of investigators there are there now, but I can tell you this, we're not hearing anything about it. And given the track record, given the number of senior Liberal staffers who were involved in briefings, who had documents such as the one I'm referring to, one has to wonder what they're covering up. Is it that they're trying to protect themselves, trying to protect their minister, trying to protect the Premier? I don't know. This is far too important a file to allow us to simply gloss over this. We won't accept it. We want that all-party committee. We want the coroner to launch a province-wide inquest. I also believe that it would be appropriate for the coroner to let us know how many investigations are undergoing. This is all about transparency. This is a public air ambulance system. $150 million of taxpayers' dollars are going into this organization every year. We deserve, the public deserves to know.
Do you think it's time, based on what you know, do you think there has been any criminal wrongdoing, and do you think it's time to call in the cops?
Well, we want to take this a step at a time. I really believe that it would be most appropriate for the government to step forward and take the leadership in terms of who these files are referred to. And also, again, I'm calling on the coroner to do his part. I believe that the coroner also has a responsibility to the public to come forward, and we're not asking for confidential information, but we are asking to be apprised of the direction the coroner is taking so that we can have confidence in his office that, in fact, every step is being taken.
We know that almost all the stories that have come public on this have come because inside employees have been concerned, and they've been providing documentation. Why do you think it's important to hear under oath from employees versus hearing what the government concludes?
Two reasons. First of all, there's a culture of intimidation in this organization. I have heard that firsthand from current and former employees. There are employees there today who continue to give me phone calls. I've had 2 emails this morning about concerns. These are employees who simply want to get on with the job. They feel intimidated. There are meetings that are going on. Employees are being told to come forward. Given the fact that these executives are still there, who were part of the intimidation culture, the employees will not come forward. They'll be very guarded in terms of what they're going to tell us. So that's the first reason. I think the second reason is that what we're seeing now is a shuffling of the decks at Orange. The minister has said that she's going to shut down some of these for-profit organizations. Well, here's what's happening. There are employees and contract employees who have contracts with those not-for-profit organizations who are now being shuffled, and they're showing up at Orange. And they're now going to be on the new not-for-profit Orange payroll. So the question is, what were those contract employees doing at these for-profit organizations that now they can do at Orange, the not-for-profit organization, which clearly is going to be paid for by public tax dollars? Folks, this is a mess. We cannot simply stand by and allow this to carry on.
Also, we read in the Globe this morning that the concerns about there not being enough room in the helicopter to perform CPR are being government is going to be stuck with. What do you think about that in terms of how it relates to the way the entire operation is?
Well, again, it calls into question the original management decision for this. You know, it's one thing to order brand new helicopters if you have people who understand what they're ordering and why. Information that I have is that there was no need for brand new helicopters, that this service in the past had been contracted out to suppliers, to businesses within our own province. Their equipment was kept up to standard, and now, because someone wanted bright, brand new orange helicopters that they could emblazon with their logo, we had to enter into a $247 million bond offering and incur $5 million in debt and who knows what else down the road for equipment that isn't even capable of delivering the kind of service that is needed. So I've heard this as well. I believe, again, I'm going to come back to our call for a select committee so that we can, in fact, gather all of this information. I think, again, the coroner has a very important role to play here. He has the authority to call witnesses. Witnesses will be protected under that circumstance, and I think that the implication, first of all, about this equipment that was ordered, the specifications that were agreed to, I think the line of responsibility goes right back to the same executive group who are still in charge at Orange today. The fact that we have Mr. Mazza on what is called medical leave, whatever that means, and the fact that we're assured that the board of directors is leaving, changes nothing there. The same people are there, the same people who made these decisions, who have a vested interest in protecting themselves. We need some intervention here, and if the government is not going to do it, let a select committee of the legislature proceed. Let the coroner assume his responsibilities.
Switching gears for a moment, Mr. Yakubuski has shown his support behind John Snoblin for the party presidential bid. Who will you support? Which candidate?
I'm not here to discuss that. This is a very important issue that I want to discuss, and I'd like to, if there's another question on that, I'd prefer to discuss that.
On direct energy moving to Texas, any comments on this?
Well, you know, on that, I can tell you that every time a business makes a decision to leave Ontario, it's a commentary on our current government, on the environment that we have here, and it's something that we've been warning the government about for many years. Businesses will go where they feel they're welcome. We have a very unwelcome environment for business in the province of Ontario, and it's getting worse by the day. These are the indications.
Do you think the energy experiments of the PC party back in 2000 actually led to a direct energy movement?
No, actually, I think it led to the growth of a direct energy, and that's why I'm particularly sad to see it leave.